working on my music right now.
Yeah.
Why Jamal Robert rejected a major label deal after American Idol. As a reporter who has covered the aftermath of American Idol seasons for years, I can confirm that the moment Jamal Robert rejected a major label deal became one of the most discussed and unexpected events in recent music news. This wasn't just a standard post-Idol offer, it was a multi-million-dollar contract from one of the most influential record labels in the United States, complete with access to elite producers, global marketing support, and built-in radio connections that could have launched Jamal into instant mainstream success. Yet behind the glossy numbers and glamorous promises, Jamal saw restrictions that deeply conflicted with his artistic values. According to internal sources familiar with the negotiation, the label had already prepared an entire creative blueprint outlining his sound, his image, and even the emotional tone of his future releases. Song selections for the next 2 years were already mapped out, leaving little to no space for Jamal's own input. The offer essentially required him to surrender control of his artistic identity in exchange for mass exposure. While many young artists would have signed without hesitation, especially after gaining momentum from Idol, Jamal took a stance that stunned industry executives. He believed the deal prioritized commercial packaging over authentic artistry, and for him, that trade-off was unacceptable. His refusal instantly sparked debates within label circles about whether the industry had underestimated the value he placed on creative freedom, marking him as one of the rare newcomers willing to sacrifice fame to protect his truth as an artist. Covering the backstage environment of American Idol provides a rare glimpse into the emotional and creative pressures placed on contestants. And in Jamal's case, those pressures had already built up long before any record label ever approached him. While audiences saw a soulful, emotionally driven performer delivering heartfelt moments on stage, what they didn't see was the constant tug-of-war happening behind closed doors. According to several production insiders who spoke to us, Jamal was frequently asked to adjust his singing style to fit television-friendly expectations, to choose songs not based on personal connection but based on what boosts ratings, and to adopt an on-camera persona that was more polished and less raw than his natural self. Week after week, Jamal reportedly found himself torn between staying true to his personal musical identity and meeting the demands of producers who prioritized consistency and marketability. There were days when he sat alone in rehearsal rooms, visibly overwhelmed, as he tried to reconcile the heart behind his music with the tone the show wanted him to project. Producers defended these adjustments as standard practice, designed to shape mass appeal. But for Jamal, they felt like repeated attempts to dilute the honesty that defined his artistry. Those experiences planted a seed of skepticism that grew into a protective instinct, an instinct that later influenced his refusal of the major label deal. By the time the contract came, he had already lived through a controlled environment, and he was determined not to allow the industry to shape him even further. Sources close to the negotiation revealed to our newsroom that the contract presented to Jamal was far more restrictive than typical deals offered to young artists. Beyond requiring him to release music chosen exclusively by the label, the document reportedly outlined strict guidelines governing everything from his vocal delivery to his stage persona to his physical appearance, including wardrobe expectations, hairstyle suggestions, and even limitations on how expressive he could be on social media. The contract included clauses preventing him from discussing certain topics online, banning him from releasing any independent music, and requiring him to participate in brand partnerships he did not necessarily agree with, so long as the label believed they aligned with market expansion. One insider described the contract as a pipeline to complete creative surrender. When Jamal read through the document, he was said to have grown increasingly uneasy, recognizing that signing it would effectively disconnect him from the emotional honesty that drives his music. For a young artist fresh from a high-pressure TV environment, accepting this deal would have meant giving up the one thing he valued most, his voice, not just as a vocalist, but as a storyteller. Instead of excitement, the contract filled him with dread. And in a move that shocked everyone in the room, Jamal quietly closed the folder, thanked the executives, and made it clear he would not be signing. It was a decision very few newcomers would dare to make, especially with millions on the table. One of the most striking details we uncovered is the extent to which Jamal's artistic vision directly contradicted the direction the label intended for him. While Jamal emerged from Idol with a reputation for raw emotional delivery, unfiltered storytelling, and a vocal texture shaped by personal struggle, the label's long-term strategy reportedly aimed to mold him into a radio-friendly pop act built around trends instead of authenticity. During early discussions, executives presented him with sample tracks, highly polished, synthesizer-heavy pop songs that bore little resemblance to the intimate, soul-leaning music Jamal is known for. According to a source present during the meeting, Jamal sat silently for several minutes before finally expressing that this sound didn't feel like me at all. Rather than acknowledging his concerns, the label insisted that adaptation was necessary and that true commercial success only happens when an artist is willing to evolve toward the market. But Jamal wasn't seeking mass-market homogenization. He wanted space to tell his own story through his own lens. For him, the proposal felt like being asked to trade his individuality for algorithm-approved hits. This fundamental clash of creative philosophy quickly became a breaking point. By refusing the deal, Jamal signaled that he would not allow the industry to repurpose him into something he wasn't, a stance that has since earned him significant respect among independent artists and music observers. As reporters followed Jamal Robert's career after his American Idol exit, it became increasingly evident that the emotional toll of the show shaped many of his professional decisions, including his bold choice to reject the major label deal. Behind the applause, magazine spreads, and social media buzz, Jamal privately struggled with a level of anxiety that few viewers ever saw. Several individuals close to the singer shared that once Idol ended, he found himself replaying every comment from the judges, every social media critique, and every high-pressure moment in his mind, almost as if he was stuck inside an echo chamber created by the show's intensity. He reportedly worried constantly about losing himself to expectations, whether from executives, fans, or the industry at large. Even the idea of entering another system where people would dictate his creative direction triggered what friends described as a visceral emotional reaction. This was not the fear of fame, but the fear of disappearing beneath it, of becoming a product instead of a person. When the label approached him with a contract that mirrored those very pressures, Jamal recognized the familiar pattern instantly. Turning down the deal was not simply about artistic integrity, it was an act of self-protection. It was a decision rooted in preserving his mental health after a year defined by relentless scrutiny. And it marked a turning point where his well-being became inseparable from his career choices. Little did anyone know that this internal struggle would eventually fuel the bold new music he would later release. But at this point, Jamal was simply trying to breathe again after surviving the Idol whirlwind. From an investigative standpoint, one of the most revealing aspects of this story is how meticulously the label had crafted Jamal's future, long before the contract even landed in his hands. According to leaked internal planning documents shared by an industry insider, the label had already created a rollout schedule, a rebranding campaign, a list of approved collaborators, and even a preliminary tour outline. These documents portrayed Jamal as a market-driven hybrid act rather than the emotionally grounded storyteller he organically became on the Idol stage. Little did anyone know that this internal struggle would eventually fuel the bold new music he would later release, but at this point, Jamal was simply trying to breathe again after surviving the Idol whirlwind. Shockingly, the blueprint included suggestions to alter his natural vocal style to fit high-rotation radio standards, a directive that reportedly left Jamal speechless during his meeting. The label had even produced mock-up visuals of album covers and promotional posters, presenting him with a polished commercial identity he barely recognized. For executives, this was standard preparation. For Jamal, it felt like an erasure of everything that made him unique. The plan relied heavily on turning him into a mainstream pop figure, but in doing so, the label ignored the very reason fans connected with him: authenticity. When he asked whether he could incorporate his own songwriting or influence the musical direction, executives allegedly responded that such input could be considered in later cycles, meaning after he had already been packaged and sold. That was the moment, according to those present, when Jamal's decision crystallized. Their attempt to turn him into a prefabricated star backfired, revealing a fundamental mismatch between corporate ambition and genuine artistic identity. No story about Jamal Robert's post-Idol journey would be complete without acknowledging the overwhelming response from fans who applauded his controversial decision. While some industry observers initially questioned his refusal of such a lucrative contract, the public sentiment quickly shifted once Jamal shared small hints about valuing creative independence. Social media platforms became filled with thousands of messages praising him for protecting his artistry, with many fans citing the emotional honesty he displayed on Idol as the reason they supported him in the first place. Several longtime viewers took to online forums to argue that major labels often transform promising artists into generic, trend-chasing acts, and they feared Jamal would lose his uniqueness under such constraints. This wave of support created a surprising shift in the narrative. Instead of being seen as a risky move, his rejection of the deal became a symbol of integrity. One viral post on X, formerly Twitter, described Jamal as the first Idol star in years brave enough to walk away from the machine, a sentiment echoed by countless others. This approval from fans didn't just validate his choice, it strengthened his resolve to carve his own path. According to a friend close to him, Jamal was deeply moved by the support, and it reaffirmed his belief that remaining independent was not a career-ending gamble, but a chance to build something more meaningful. Their encouragement became the emotional anchor he needed during a moment when industry professionals doubted him, proving that his connection with listeners was far deeper than any label could engineer. In the days following Jamal's refusal of the major label deal, conversations rippled through industry circles with surprising force. Label executives, producers, and talent scouts were taken aback, not because artists never turn down deals, but because few Idol alumni do so at the peak of their momentum. Jamal's rejection challenged long-standing assumptions about how new talent is expected to behave, particularly reality TV artists who are often seen as eager to sign anything that promises longevity. According to sources within multiple label offices, Jamal's choice sparked internal discussions about whether the era of controlling one-size-fits-all contracts might be coming to an end. Some executives privately admitted that younger artists are far more aware of the dangers of restrictive agreements than their predecessors, largely because of social media transparency and the rise of independent success stories. Jamal's act of defiance, though quiet and respectful, forced many in the industry to reconsider how they approach talent fresh from televised competitions. His decision revealed a growing resistance among new artists who refused to be molded into products, and it placed Jamal at the center of a much larger conversation about creative autonomy. Insiders described the atmosphere as a wake-up call, with some suggesting that labels may need to adapt or risk losing the most promising voices of the next generation. Months after turning down the major label offer, Jamal began quietly crafting new music, this time entirely on his own terms. As a reporter with access to emerging artist circles, I can confirm that early listeners described his new sound as richer, more textured, and far more personal than anything he performed on Idol. Free from corporate expectations, Jamal experimented with live instrumentation, emotionally raw lyrics, and vocal arrangements that showcased the storytelling depth he always wanted to reveal. According to producers who collaborated with him independently, Jamal's sessions were fueled by relief, curiosity, and a renewed sense of creative hunger. They described him as an artist meeting himself for the first time. Instead of chasing chart trends, he focused on authenticity, writing about his idol experiences, his private anxieties, and the journey of reclaiming his artistic identity. This era became a quiet renaissance for Jamal, allowing him to rebuild not just his sound, but his confidence as a musician. And though he hadn't yet announced any major releases, insiders felt certain he was constructing something powerful enough to justify every sacrifice he made. The rejection of the label deal was no longer a risky move. It was the catalyst for the purest music of his life. In the end, Jamal Robert's story is not one of missed opportunities, but one of intentional transformation. By refusing the major label contract, he chose a future built on self-direction rather than industry design. A future where his music reflects his own truths rather than corporate formulas. In the end, Jamal Robert's story is not one of missed opportunities, but one of intentional transformation. According to those closest to him, Jamal now feels more connected to his purpose as an artist than ever before. He is free to experiment, free to grow, and free from the pressure to conform to an image that never belonged to him. Though he may not have the immediate global exposure that a major label could have provided, he has something far more valuable: a foundation rooted in authenticity. As his independent journey continues, industry analysts now believe that Jamal may become a defining example of how idol alumni can reclaim power in an environment historically dominated by restrictive deals. His decision marks the beginning of an era where artistic integrity triumphs over commercial temptation. And while no one can predict exactly how far he will go, one thing is clear: Jamal Robert is building a career that belongs entirely to him, shaped not by contracts or executives, but by the courage to protect his voice at any cost.